ॐ आप्यायन्तु ममाङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रम् अतो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः अनन्तगुणपूर्णत्वादगम्याय सुरैरपि सर्वेष्टदात्रे देवानां नमो नारायणाय ते. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for friends who have joined for the 11th session on Keno Upanishad. So, we have completed the first kanda. Yeah, over the last 3 months, we have done really well. We have completed the first kanda, which has about 9 mantras. Okay, so who is the Rishi? Chaturmukha Brahma, Sadashiva, Parvati, Talavakara Rishi, and all the acharyas or the rishis for this Upanishad. Devata is Vishnunamaka Paramatma, who also goes by infinite names, including Hrishikesha, Kapila, Aniruddha, and Gayatri. The chandas for this amazing Upanishad is Trishtup chandas, which has 44 syllables, and Anushtup chandas, which is the most common chandas that is in this Upanishad. So the Abhimani Devatas of the chandas, Anushtup chandas, Abhimani Devata is Rohini, consort of Chandra, and Trishtup chandas, which got 44 syllables, the Abhimani Devata is Sachi. So we have to contemplate on all these devatas before we are able to make our pravesha into the verses. So what did we do for nine? The nine verses, how did they go? They start off with the Trishtup chandas and finish off with an Anishtup chandas. So what we are going to do today is, because we've done the first kanda, I think it is a good idea to have a good revision of what the first kanda was all about. As we have always said in the satsanga, Avrittihi asakrita upadeshat, as Veda Vyasa has said, the more we revise, the more firmed up knowledge we get. So that revision is very important, and we should never lose the opportunity to revise again and again. And this gives us a good occasion because we have completed the first kanda. So what is going on here? So let's do a Simha Avalokana Nyaya. So we are the lions of the jungle. Yeah. So we are navigating this forest called the samsara, and we are looking back at the philosophy that we have learned as we are going through this jungle, so that we can be the king and at the same time find our way out of this jungle. Yeah, so this Simha Avalokana Nyaya is very important in Vedic philosophy, where after you have done a key set of verses or a chapter, you look back, just as how a lion looks back and sees the path it has taken so far. And very similarly, when you are doing Shastra Abhyasa, we should always do the Simha Avalokana. Look back and see what we have done so far. So, what have we done so far? Initially, with the very first verse, very first session, we had an overarching view of what's happening in Samaveda. So we looked at Veda, then and how Veda Vyasa compacted the Vedas into four subtypes called the Samaveda is one among them. You have Rig, Yajus, Sama, and Atharva. Then in the Samaveda, we knew that in the Vedic times there were 1,000 shakes, 1,000 different branches of Samaveda, and each part were preserved by the families down the generations. And of course, over the last several thousand years, we so-called Hindus or Sanatanis have conveniently made it a job for us that we should forget all the Vedas and we should shun them. We should not bother to preserve them. So what's happened now? There's only three left: Gautama, Jaiminiya, and Ranayaniya. These are the three. These are the three. These are the three shakas that are just now left: Gautama, Jaiminiya, Ranayaniya. So these are three shakas out of 1,000 shakas that are left. Yeah. So at least three is left, right? So one other shake that is left is called Talavakara shake. The Talavakara shake of the Samaveda has been preserved by the Talavakara Rishi and his disciples. Okay, so this Talavakara Rishi and his descendants is very interesting because the Talavakara word itself we understood it means Talavadhyakara. Talavadya, Samaveda means music, right? Vedic mantras set in music. And that can be either through vocal cords or it could be through musical instruments. And one of the musical instruments is Talavadya. Okay, so our gurus teach us in the ancient times that the Samaveda was preserved through Talavadya, and there was a family that was looking after it. So this Upanishad is called. So this Shake is called Talavakara Shake. Then, of course, there are some interesting etymology of Talavakara. Ta plus lava plus kara. Okay, that which comes in front of it is lower or under its control is the literal meaning of Talavakara. It's very interesting because the name of the Upanishad itself summarizes the philosophy that is being described. Note I put IT in capital, that IT is Brahman. Okay, that which comes in front of Brahman is lower and is under Brahman's control. So that which comes in front of the Antaryamin is lower and under the Antaryamin's control. That is you and me, the Jivas. So we are in front of Brahman and the Brahman is controlling us. Is the etymology of Talavakara. So when we look at it from that perspective, the name of the Shake itself tells us what is the philosophy that is being discussed here. Okay, so the Talavakare Shake, of course, every Shake of the every Veda, Rig Veda, Samaj, Atharvan, and in Yajur Veda, you have Samhita portions, you have Brahmana portions, you have Aranyaka portions, and you have the Upanishad portions. Yeah. So the Samhita portion of the Talavakara Shake is now lost. We don't have it. Okay. All that we have is a portion of Brahmana portion of the Talavakara Upanishad. So that's called a Talavakara Brahmana. And in that Talavakara Brahmana is the Talavakara Upanishad. Okay. So this Talavakara Upanishad has got many names. It goes by Keno Upanishad, which is very popular. Okay. Keno Upanishad because let's take a quick quiz there. So, who is going to tell us why Talavakara Upanishad is called Keno Upanishad? So, who is going to answer that question? Any takers for that, please? Why is Talavakara called Keno Upanishad?
Mother, it's
It
I think the
starts with
first word is Kena.
Yeah, thank you, Ajit
Kenishatam
ji.
is
Very, very well said. Sorry, who was the other friend who was trying to answer this? Was it Sushrut ji?
it was me, mother. I was saying the same thing,
Oh,
Suresh.
thank you. Thank you, Suresh. Fantastic. Yes. So the first word is Kene Shitam. So somebody said, okay, let's call this as Keno Upanishad. Yeah. But if you're a purist, if you're a purist, you're a Vedist, you should always call this as a Talavakara Upanishad, not as Keno Upanishad. But Keno Upanishad is the popular way. But then the question there is why Keno Upanishad just for any Upanishad? All Upanishads start with questions. Kena means question, like why? Yeah. So all Upanishads start with questions. So in that case, all Upanishads should be called Kena Upanishad. Yeah. So if you look at Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it says Kim Karanam Brahma. That is how it starts. Kim. Then it must be called Kim Upanishad. No. Kena Upanishad is just popular, but please remember Talavakara Upanishad is the correct name of it. It is also called Narayana Brahmana Upanishad. It is also called Trimurti Upanishad, which is very interesting. It's called Trimurti Upanishad because the conversation of this Upanishad is between Sadashiva and Chaturmukha, and they talk about the Vishnu Tattva. So Vishnu, Shiva, and Chaturmukha, the Trimurtis that are quite popular in certain sections of the Hindu faith. You could call this as Trimurti Upanishad because these are the chief characters of this Upanishad. So Talavakara Upanishad, Keno Upanishad, Narayana Brahmana Upanishad, Trimurti Upanishad. Okay, so this Upanishad has got 4 khandas, and the 4 khandas, and there are mantras in each khanda. So 9, 5, 12, and 9. So together it is 35. There are 35 mantras in the whole of the Keno Upanishad, and so far we have done 9 verses over the last 3 months. Okay. So still lots to do. So there's still lots to go with regards to when we are going to complete this Upanishad. But as you know, in our satsang, we are always making an attempt to understand the verses of the Upanishads in greater detail. Yeah. So some folks would say these 35 verses are grouped in Padya and Gadya. So Padyas are the verses, Gadya is the prose. So there are some prose section of in this Upanishad, but some scholars would also consider those prose also as chandas, as we will see. in the later part of today's satsang. Okay. So, where did this happen? So, last week or the week before, we had Shaptarshi, I think, asking the question, where is the evidence as to how this? It was the Sadashiva who approached Chaturmukha Brahma in Vaijayanta, in one of the peaks of the Vaijayanta, to ask this pertinent question. So, Sripad Acharya actually gives a reference in Brahmasara, which is an extant text now, because like how we have lost all the Vedas, we are very good at losing our scriptures. That is something that we have to give credit to ourselves, because we are very, very good in losing our scriptures, to forget our identity, to forget our faith, and all those things we are very good at. And similarly, we have also lost many of the extant texts. So in Acharya's time, all the scriptures were there. So Brahmasara says, Vaijayante Samasinam Ekante Chaturananam. Okay, Vishnor Vividishu Tattvam Pariyapruchata Sadashivaha. Chaturananam is Chaturmukha. Sadashivaha is Rudra. So Rudra asks this question to Chaturmukha Brahma, is what the Brahmasara tells us in the Meru mountain. So that gives us the introduction to this Upanishad, because as we have done, as we have discussed many times, we should never read the Upanishad without acknowledging the Guru, without acknowledging the student, without acknowledging the Devata, without acknowledging the Chandas, without acknowledging the Abhimani Devatas or the Chandas, and so on. So these are all the basic rules in which we study the Upanishad. So we understood from Brahmasara that Srimad Acharya has given us this reference. We understood that Sadashiva is the student, Chaturmukha is the guru, and they are talking about Vishnu Tattva. Okay, so let me get my slides to move. It is there we go. So we now go to the 9 verses. What I'll do is, having had this basic intro, to just remind ourselves what is it that we are dealing with, let me just briefly run through the 9 verses, the salient features of the 9 verses, so that we have a good grasp of what we've discussed so far. So the first verse, what happened? So the Sadashiva went to, he was up in the he went up to the Vaijayanta mountain and asked the first question: Om kene shitam patati preshitam manaha kena pranaha pratamaha praiti yuktaha kene shitam vacham imam vadanti chakshuhu shrotram kavudevo yunakti. Is what the Sadashiva asked Chaturmukha, this fantastic question. This is the primordial question that should plague us. We don't do it, but the beauty of this Upanishad is it is asking us to ask ourselves that question, the primordial question: what is this body? We don't have to search everywhere for philosophy. We just need to do philosophy within ourselves. Ask that question: what is this for body? Okay, we are possibly getting better at the how of it, the physiological aspect of how a body functions. With all the advancements in science, we seem to be reasonably good at it. Okay, the physiological aspects we probably, but the philosophical aspects, why does it function like this? Who made it to function like this? So this is the question that we need to be asking. And Sadashiva asked these questions not because he doesn't know, but there are 3 reasons. We have done it before. He wants to have a firmed up knowledge. He wants to have a deeper understanding of what he has learned so far. And at the same time, he wants to ask these questions on behalf of us, the mundane souls. And this is the question that he has asked, as to why is these functioning like this? Okay. Manaha, mind; pranaha, the vital breath; vacham, the organs of speech; shrotram, the organ of hearing; chakshuhu, the organ of seeing. Yeah. So these are all the organs that are there on our face, and we just can ask this question: who made it so that should be on our face? Why is it is working like this? Okay, the physiology, the biologists may say this is all natural evolution, but that's a different argument. Natural evolution, with the sets of mutations that needs to happen for this complex biological system to be up and running, is actually statistical impossibility, say the scientists. You need so much of organized mutations that needs to happen, that the way this body has been designed itself is a statistical impossibility if it was a random event. okay, through mutations, which is also a random event. Okay, so I think there is one school, the naturalists, the atheists view it as a spontaneous situation, whereas the other school believes that there must be an intelligent design. So that's the key point there. Who made it so? What makes the sense organs move towards their sense organs? Do they move on their own, as the materialists have told us? Are they prompted by the souls which are inside them that makes these sense organs to work in this fashion? Or are they some higher conscious entities that control these sense organs? And are these higher sentient entities ultimately under the control of some master that controls all of the above? So, in this one question, Rudra has actually compacted the whole of philosophy that we want to know, and this is what the Vedantic philosophy is all about. Okay, so that was the key question, and there we also understood that there was some beauty with regards to the sequence in which this has happened. One sequence there is this kind of takes the traces the origin of humans. Okay, you may remember Panchagni Vidya. So, who is going to briefly remind us what Panchagni Vidya is? Panchagni Vidya of Chandogya Upanishad, Panchagni Vidya, aspects of it that comes in Mundaka Upanishad, and so on. So, anybody wants to share what that Panchagni Vidya is? No worries. So the Panchagni Vidya, basically, if I may remind you, talks about the journey of souls. Okay, the five stages in which the journey of souls happens. So for the souls, say, let's say they've gone up to Swarga, for example. Some souls are in Swarga, they have to come down. So from Swarga, they'll come down to Parjanya Loka. And from Parjanya Loka, through rainfall, they fall on earth. And through raindrops, they go into the plants. And in the plants, they go into all the fruits and vegetables that we eat. Then there is a man who eats these fruits and vegetables and grains and so on. And then that soul, then from what he has eaten, it gets into the sperms in a man. Then there is the female. The female, there is the egg. Then the sperm that go into the egg. Then there is a fertilization. Then there is a womb. Then there is an embryo that is developing in the womb. Okay. So now this embryo now comes into the earth again. So how does it come? First, this particular section actually gives a good idea of how that may be happening. So the sequence in which the Rudra is asking to is the fetus thinks. Then it comes out and takes the first breath at delivery. Then it makes the first cry. Then it opens its eyes. Then it starts hearing and starts assessing the external world. Then it goes into samsara, it does all its karmas. Then again, one day the body is gone. Then the souls again make their journey upwards. If they have made some good acts, then they go to Swarga. Then from Swarga, Parjanya, water, and so on. There are 5 stations that is described in the Chandogya Upanishad that very beautifully captures the journey of souls. And we are looking at this journey that is happening from conception up to the delivery of the baby, and how that baby behave, what happens in the sequences is one view as to how the sequence of these manaha, pranaha, vacha, shrotra, and chakshuhu is arranged, gives us an idea of this. And of course, the mind, speech, ear, and eyes are the organs of, these are through and vital breaths, these are essential for our spiritual journey. Okay, so this we are very familiar with, but can I get one of us to remind us how does that spiritual journey happens with ear, eyes, speech, and mind? So who wants to give us the order in which it's happening? Think yourself being in the Gurukula and you're listening to a guru, and how would that happen? Anybody wants to share that for us? How that sequence would happen? Yeah, Anand, go for it.
So is the sequence of this mind, breath, and organ, speech, or hearing, or the other way?
Yeah. So how does it? Yeah. So this whole organs, how do they work? I mean, how do we learn? So in the Gurukula, first we hear, right, and then we hear.
Oh yes, yes. The sadhana is of 2 types: the study of shastras and meditating. The studying is like swadhyaya or discourse. We hear from gurus, and then once we hear and learn, we contemplate on it. That is the manana, and then once we have that manana, we teach others, and that is the speech. And then for meditation, we have to control the breath, the pranayama.
Excellent. And the eyes is eventually when we have done the other three, we might be having the Aparoksha Jnana and we might be able to see our Antaryamin directly. So it gives you the whole spiritual journey as well. Anandji, thank you so much. Wonderful. So when Rudra asked that question, so how do these sense organs are working and so on? So immediately our Chaturmukha then takes off. He's so happy that Rudra has asked him this question. And he immediately said, if you recall, Shrotrasya Shrotram, Manasa Mano, Yadvachoha Vacham, Savupranasya Pranaha, Chakshushash Chakshuhu, Atimuchya Dhiraha, Pretyasmat Lokad Amruta Bhavati. So at that point, we understood what is all this Shrotrasya Shrotram, Manasa Mano, Yadvachaha Vacham, Savupranasya Pranaha. It's felt very cryptic, but Raghavendra Tirtha gives us a good direction. Shravana Shakti Pradaha, Manana Shakti Pradaha, Vag Ucharana Shakti Pradaha, Darshana Shakti Pradaha, Pranasya Mukyavayo, Pranaha Praneta, the giver of the power of hearing to the ears, or Anchandra, the giver of the power of thinking to the mind and the Rudra, the giver of the power of talk to the speech and also to Agni, the giver of power of seeing, giving the giver of the power of vision to the eyes as well as to Surya, the promoter of even prana or vayu is what Chaturmukha said. That is the one that motivates everything. The Shrotrasya Shrotra, the Manasa Mana, that Vachaha Vacham, the Chakshusha Chakshu, Pranasya Pranaha. Note that he doesn't specify who it is. This is the beauty of this Upanishad. He doesn't directly say Adharyamina. It gives you a very cryptic message. Shrotrasya Shrotram Manasa Mana. Why is it doing that? It wants us to think about two aspects that we have to be very, very, we are experts already, I'm pretty sure. So it's talking about cosmic Antaryamin. So there is this Antaryamin in us, inside the Shrotra. There is the Shrotrasya Shrotram. It is to give you those idea of the cosmic Antaryamin. That is, of course, described in the Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And also to give us the doctrine of dependence and independence. So the Shrotrasya Shrotram is the independent stuff. Whereas the Shrotra is dependent on that. So that is the idea of talking about Shrotrasya Sotram. And in that section, you might remember that we discussed that the Vedas give us two examples. They give us two examples of how the dependence and independence is working. Okay, so I have these two examples here. So who would like to share their thoughts about how these two examples illustrate the relationship between dependence and independence? So who wants to take these examples? As you know, this is revision, right? So we want to think about what we have done before. So these two examples that are there, anybody wants to tell us about how that brings out dependence and independence relationship? Who wants to take that one? Anand, yes.
The first one is the Bimba Pratibimba doctrine, wherein the reflected image is entirely dependent upon the Bimba. So that shows that the doctrine of dependence, and the shadow falling on the floor is completely it's complete dependence upon the main Lord.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Anand, again. So remember when the Vedas talk about dependence and independence, there are two examples. Yeah, one is the object and the mirror and the reflection, and the object and its shadow. Okay, the object and its shadow is very beautifully discussed in Prashna Upanishad when the Rishi is asking about who controls the prana. And that discussion about pranasya prana, there is this conversation that happens. So never forget. Okay. So thanks, Anandji, for that. So we understood these concepts when we did that particular verse, the second verse. And remember in the first verse, our Rudra had asked, this isn't it. Kavudevo Yunakti. So this conversation is going on between these two great beings that they're having this conversation. So that part of the words Kavudevo Yunakti. Yunakti means the regulator, the controller. How does the Deva, remember, look at all those words, Deva, Eko Devaha, Shvetashvara Upanishad and places, you know that Deva means Brahman. So now Chaturmukha is saying, yes, I understand it is the Deva who is the controller, Yunakti. How does he do that? Kavu. How does he do this? How does this controllership actually happen? We can just say he controls, but how does he do that? Explain to me the greatness of that controller of senses and mind. How can I know him? How does he control and so on is the next beautiful question. So as we have done before, each verse relates to the other one. So at this point, when this controllership that is going on, the discussion about Antaryamin and the controllership that is going on, I just wanted to briefly not distract ourselves, but extremely relevant, but pick up another Upanishad where there is a similar conversation. So that is in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, third Adhyaya. So this is one of the greatest chapters of Upanishads, where there is a conversation between Gargi and Yajnavalkya. Okay, so Gargi and Yajnavalkya, they're having a conversation. Then there is the king called Janaka of Vaideha who has organized something. Anybody wants to give us the background to this incident between Janaka, Vaideha, Yajnavalkya, and Gargi? So what has happened here that has brought up this philosophical discussion in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad? Anybody wants to share those thoughts for us here, very briefly? Right. So the story of that is Janaka of Vaideha. He is doing a sacrifice. He's doing a Vedic sacrifice, and he has invited all these scholars from around. Oh, they will go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so all the scholars have come and he's going to give away the cows, 1,000 cows with gold coins attached to each horn. So Yajnavalkya says, if anyone wants to, so he says he knows answers to all the questions and he wants to take away the cows with the gold coins. And that's when he's challenged by others. And Gargi is one of those who challenges Yajnavalkya. So they discuss about Brahman and lots of questions about Brahman.
Thank you very much, Neetaji. Perfect answer. So that's a beautiful setting. The seed is so beautiful that is set there, where the Vaideha, the Janaka is sitting there, and all the scholars are sitting, and then Gargi, the great Rishika, who studied a lot of Vedas and Upanishads, she comes up and says, "Okay, let me ask Yajnavalkya," because Yajnavalkya, he is such a big scholar of his time, and I would actually like to submit in our satsang that we should all be studying the life histories of Yajnavalkya and all the rishis of the ancient times rather than focusing on the modern fake ones. So if you look at the life history of Yajnavalkya, it is just utterly inspiring. So this Yajnavalkya is such a great scholar, and he says, "I am the greatest scholar. I will pick up all the cows who have got lots of gold coins attached to their horns." And then he stopped at that time, and various rishis come up and question him, and he answers them. Okay, so thanks, Neetaji, for that. So there is this very beautiful section which is very relevant to the Shrotrasya Shrotram discussion that we are having. So I thought I'll bring it up. Yadva yetad aksharam Gargi adrishtam drishtra Shrotram Shrotr Matam Mantra Vijnatam Vijnatr Na Anyadato Asti Drashtr Na Anyadato Asti Shrotr Na Anyadato Asti Mantra Na Anyadato Asti Vijnatr Vijnate Tasmin Khalu Akshare Gargi Akasha Otascha Protascha. So this is a beautiful set of words. Sounds complicated, but the organs of the sense organs that are picked up is exactly similar to what has been picked up in the current Keno Upanishad. Shrotra, look at this, Shrotra, Drashtra, Mantra, and so on. So what is happening is Gargi is asking the question, so who is controlling all this? So our Yajnavalkya is saying, although invisible, adrashtam drashtru, although he is invisible, he is the one that sees. Okay. Ashrutam Shrotru, although inaudible, he is the one that actually hears. Mantra Avignat Amatam Mantra. Although he is beyond Manas, he is the one that actually feels. Although unknown, avijnatam, vijnatra. Although he is unknown, he is the one that knows. Okay, so look at those cryptic statements. It feels very, very nebulous. But Once we have read the Keno Upanishads and have got our bearings right, we can directly link as to what it is that Yajnavalkya is getting at. He is actually talking about this Antaryamin who is controlling all this. So when our Chaturmukha said Shrotrasya Shrotram, okay, although he is inaudible, he is the one that hears because he is the inner controller of everything and he is an independent person. Okay, this one is beautiful. Na anyadato asti drashtru, na anyadato asti shrotru, na anyadato asti mantru, na anyadato asti vijnatru. No one there is other than this that sees. Beautiful language of the Vedas. No one there is other than this capital this that actually sees. No one there is other than this that hears. No one there is other than this that feels. No one there is other than this that knows. Okay. This is how Yajnavalkya answers to Gargi, and then at this point, Gargi says, guys, the rest of you rishis, you're in big trouble. I don't think you're ever going to be able to win over Yajnavalkya. And then the questions go on. So check that section out of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, one of the most beautiful sections of Upanishad. So once we have understood the concepts of Antaryamin, then we move to the third verse. Chaturmukha then says, Natatra. So our Rudra said, tell me more about him. I want to know more about him as to how he performs his controllership. So immediately Chaturmukha says, Natatra chakshur gacchati, navag gacchati, no manaha. Na vidmaha na vijanimo yet yetat anushishyad. Anushishya means anushishya means controllership. Yet yetat anushishyat, how he does this controllership, na vidmaha, na vijanimaha. We may not know it, we cannot actually know this even in the general sense and also in the specific sense. So there are general aspects to it, how Brahman may be working, and there may be specific aspects to how you might be performing certain functions. We just do not know, is what Chaturmukha Brahma very categorically says, and he includes himself. Okay. Why is that? Because na tatra chakshur gacchati, navag gacchati, no manaha. And then we have looked at eyes, speech and mind. They are taken up for contemplation because they are very, very important for ours. The initial acquisitions of knowledge. Eyes is taken first because eyes is the most important of all the organs of senses of knowledge. Eyes, the perception through eyes is considered to be very important. Okay, so this is a jnana indriya. Speech is a karma indriya where it goes outwards. Speech is a karma indriya. Okay, whereas the mind is an internal sense organ that processes information both ways. Things that come in or the things that go out, they have to go through the minds to perform this. So our Chaturmukha takes these three and says, see, the material eyes cannot obtain the knowledge of him. For us jivas, okay, because our material eyes are material, but he is non-material. Surya is the Abhimani Devata. He also cannot know him fully. Remember, we have had that discussion. So by implication, all organs of perceptions under Tattvabhimani Devatas also are included in this. Then, of course, the speech, we understood Agni and Parvati. Agni as the organ of speech, Parvati as the Abhimani of speech itself. Speech, again, cannot give us the full knowledge of him. Verbal testimony cannot give us the full knowledge of him because our speech is limited, number one, and he is infinite, speech is finite, and that there are issues around paroksha jnana that we have discussed. No matter how much theory that we learn, it is still is an unknown entity for us because we have actually not directly seen it. So whatever the Vedas are telling to us is only paroksha jnana. It is the documentations of experiences of rishis. But for us, it is still, something that we are not still, we have not seen. So we actually do not know, no matter how much Veda that we study. Mind cannot obtain the knowledge of him. Rudra, Chandra, and all the Abhimani Devatas also cannot obtain the knowledge of him. Okay. Similarly, when we have done these Abhimani Devatas, we are also talking about the instruments of knowledge, perception, verbal testimony, and logical reasoning. And in that, using these three examples in the first line, Chaturmukha says, these organs of these means of knowledge that we have at our disposal for our transactions in the external world cannot give us the full knowledge of Brahman, perception, verbal testimony, and logical reasoning. So we did that at that point, and then when this section about na vidmaha na vijanimo yati etad anushyat, I think we tackled some very subtle concepts of knowledge. Kevala pramana. What is knowledge? Okay, we looked at Pramana Lakshana of Srimad Acharya and we understood, what is Ishvara's knowledge, what is Lakshmi's knowledge, what is the clarity and extent of the knowledge of Chaturmukha and Vayu, Saraswati and Bharati. These guys called the Parashukla and then what is the scope and the clarity and the extent of knowledge of Tattvabhimani Devatas, and then all the way up to the really, mundane souls like us. So there we understand that is the reason why Chaturmukha has said this. He said, I don't know. Na Vidumaha. Chaturmukha is the highest among the souls. He belongs to the category of Rujus, as we know, including Vayu. So that means these guys themselves, they say, Na Vidumaha. I don't know the general aspects. Na Vijani Maha. I don't know the detailed aspects. So we understood at that point, there is the gradation of knowledge. Not all of us get the knowledge of everything with greater quality. And we had this example of the ice cream. If you may remember that our knowledge of ice cream is very different. If you're an ant, if you're a worm, if you're a human, if you're a dog, or if you are Chaturmukha Brahma, or if you are Vishnu, the knowledge of what you have about the ice cream will be very different. Okay, so that is what we discussed at that point, that the clarity of knowledge among sentient beings in Vedic philosophy when we did this particular verse. Okay, hang on. Okay. So then the question was, why is this Brahman so unknowable by the sense organs? So that was the next question. And you are saying, Natatra chakshur gacchati navag gacchati no manaha. So the question is, why is that the case? Okay, why is that situation? And this is what is the pragmatic philosophy of the Upanishads. We need to accept the philosophy as it is and the reality in which we are living in. What is that reality? That reality is Brahman is unknowable to us at this point of time through our senses and mind. Why? Anyadeva tad viditad ato aviditad adi iti sushruma purvesham yenas tad vyachachakshire. The reason is he is different. We looked at what is viditat, what is aviditat. And then we said he is different. Viditat tad anyadeva, aviditat tad anyadeva. So in that viditat we understood that which we know, the manifested world, the sat, that which is in appearance in the gross, that which is gross and we can see through our eyes, earth, water and fire. Sat, that which is existent in the universe, they are all grouped under viditat. The world of matter and souls is viditat for us. But this guy is different from all these things. Not only that, he is also different from things that which we don't know, and he is different from all the avyakta, that is the unmanifested. And the avyakta, there we understood that avyakta is not only the unmanifested Mula Prakriti, but also the Chetana behind the Mula Prakriti, with the Shri Tattva or Lakshmi is also called avyakta. Then we understood it could be Asat, which is air and space, or it could be Asat, which are the non-existence like Sahivishana. Avyakta Tattva, as I just told, as we discussed a second ago, Chetana Prakriti, Avididat Tad Anyadeva. This guy is even different from all this. So he is an entirely different ontological entity. That is why your instruments of knowledge cannot have a knowledge of him. Is the beautiful answer that Chaturmukha is giving step by step about Brahman is an entirely different ontological entity. Sarvottamashta sarvatra sa Vishnuriti dharyatam. So then our Radha says, explain to me a little bit more. So he takes the Shrotrasya Shrotram, Manasa Mano, Yadvacha Havacham, Savupranasya Pranaha, Chakshushash Chakshuhu, Atimuchya Dhiraha, Pretya Asman Lokad Amruta Bhavati. So that particular verse, the second verse, Chaturmukha takes it up for further discussion. He has said that this guy is totally unreachable in the current state. Okay, and then he goes this 5 verses which we have done in two sessions. Yat vacha anabhyuditam yena vak abhyudyate tadeva brahma tvam viddhi nedam yedidam upasate yen manasa na manute yena ahur manomatam tadeva brahma tvam viddhi nedam yedidam upasate. And Yat chakshusha na pashyati yena chakshumshi pashyati, yat shotrena na pashyati yena shrotramidam shrutam, Yat pranena na pranite yena pranaha praniyate. And as you know, 5 times he has said this. Tadeva brahmatvam viddhi nedam edidam upasate. So he goes on to explain how Parvati cannot know him fully, the speech cannot describe him, the Abhiman Devatas do not, by whom the organs of speech and the deity of speech functions. It feels like a repetition from what we have discussed, but there are deeper meanings. Go back and look at those sessions. By whom the material mind, the deity of mind functions, by whom the material eyes and the Surya functions, by whom the material ears and the deity of hearing functions, by whom the Mukhya Prana functions. I, who was the Mukhya Prana in the previous creation, and Prana, who will be the Chaturmukha Brahma in the next creation, are totally dependent on him. Those are all the ideas of those 5 verses, but in each verse, the second line was Tadeva Brahmatvam Iddhi Na Idam Edidam Upasate. And we understood that beautifully, right? Tadeva Brahmatvam Vidhi, 5 times, Nedam Yadidam Upasate, 5 times there we understood the idea of Abhyasa. If there is a if the verses come again and again in the Vedas, it is not repetition, it is reiteration. So there is a difference, right, in that. So that reiteration, so that we get firmed up knowledge. It is an important verse. Look at this verse carefully and so on. Okay, so we understood that Brahma there is Brahma Shabdashta Vishnaveva. That is what Chaturmukha is talking about his dad. Shiva is asking about his granddad, and Chaturmukha is talking about his his dad. So that is the relationship that is going on there. So there Chaturmukha says, not this in front that people worship. The material symbols and the jivas, they are not Brahman, is very clear from the verses, and we have done this in detail last week. Na idam. And we looked at na idam verses, very similar verses that come in various other portions of the Veda. Sarvam kalvidam brahma, Vasudevaha sarvamiti, Ishavasyam idang sarvam, Purusha eva idang sarvam, Aksharam idang sarvam, in various Upanishads. It appears to say that this Brahman is everything. But our Keno Upanishad, Talavakara Upanishad says, Na idam. He is not this. So in that we did a bit of reconciliation to understand how to put these verses in context, in proper, we looked at Sapta Supratama there, how the noun cases, the various noun cases, and how the first case has the capacity to also describe all other cases, and that is how we have to understand Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Not this Brahman is everything, or Brahman alone is the real thing and all others don't exist. No, it is how to understand through the Sapta Supratama, the 7 noun cases. So go back and look at that. So that was I thought a very, very important section of the Keno Upanishad of this Kanda, which is the last 5 verses. Okay, where Chaturmukha has categorically said, I am not Brahman, you are not Brahman, none of you are Brahman, these symbols that we have outside is not Brahman, this deity worship directly is not Brahman. You have to actually, it is something entirely different. You have to look at the omnipresence of Brahman and do that worship. And we had an amazing interactive session last week on this verse. So not this in front that people worship, material symbols and jivas are not Brahman. But then the same verse says, Yadidam upa asate. That upa asa then becomes very important in etymology. So how the words are compacted in the Upanishad. Upa asa means upa asate, that which is very close to you. Upa asa, it is right next to you. Like the Dvasuparana, it is right next to you. But it is that is in front of you as your Antaryamin. He is Brahman. Do that upasana of that Brahman who is right in front of you as your Antaryamin is a clear message of this. So again, if you look at these verses, you put them in context, it's very important. Yadidam upasate. You have to look at the Antaryamin is what the language is. Okay, so this is what we have done over the last 3 months, over 45 minutes. So at this point, our Rudra is very happy. He is very happy. He said, oh, Chaturmukha, you have given me a very, very beautiful description of how all these organs of senses, the Tattvabhimani Devatas are all working, and how there is this Antaryamin, how he is doing. Thank you very much. I now understand. I now know who that Brahman is. Okay, is what Rudra may be telling Chaturmukha Brahma in a Vaijayanti. Thank you very much. I've learned. Thank you. I understand now. At that point, Chaturmukha says, hold on, Sadashiva. Please proceed with caution. And this is the next set of verse. Okay, beautiful verses. The next set of verse. Let me get this. Let me get my IT sorted out. Just bear with me for a minute. Yeah. यदि मन्यसे सुवेदेति दह्रमेवापि नूनं त्वं वेत्त ब्रह्मणो रूपं यदस्य त्वं यदस्य देवेषु अतनु मीमांस्यम् एवते मन्ये विदितम्. Immediately, Shatrugna is so cautious. He is the highest among the souls, but he is instructing Sadashiva in a wonderful, wonderful way. He says, Sadashiva, you are saying you know everything. Be careful, be cautious. Yeah. What is that? Yadi manyase suvedeti dahramevapi nunam tvam vetta brahmano rupam. Yad asya tvam yadasya deveshu atanu mimamsyam evate manye viditam. So we are now made our pravesha into the second kanda. This is the first verse of the second kanda, which, of course, not surprisingly, is a verse which is not only cryptic, but the language is so beautiful as to how the words are put in for us to get a grasp of what is going on here. So the key problem here is this Brahman is infinite. So the question is, previous verses he said, yeah, okay, he's Aviditat and Viditat, Anyadeva, he's different from all this. And yeah, that I understand. But how do I actually get the grasp of the concept of infinitude? How do you get that? Because that is the key there. How do we understand? But forget about those who think they are Brahman themselves. So that is a very, very sad, sad philosophy. I just wish they read the Keno Upanishad detailed properly, because the Chaturmukha said you can never know him, ever never know him. And how can you become Brahman? So I find it interesting that some folks interpret like that. But if you look at the spirit of what Chaturmukha is saying, Yadi manyase suvedeti dahramevapi nunam tvam Veta Brahmano Rupam. So, what does that mean? So, hang on. I'm having ongoing IT issues, so hopefully it'll work. Yes, there we are. So, the key discussion of the second kanda really is a further elaboration of what is that infinitude of the infinite nature of Brahman that is being described here, the unknowability of Brahman's infinite glory. That is what Chaturmukha Brahma wants us to understand. Okay, so that we develop some devotion towards him, because he is such a big being. Okay, so he has done this. So he has done this verse. So what we will do over the next 10 to 12 minutes is try and tackle at least the first few lines of this kanda, having understood the background in which this conversation is proceeding. Every kanda is related to the previous kanda. So we have summarized the previous. Now let's move to the current kanda. Yadi manyase suvedeti dahramevapi nunam tvam vetta brahmano rupam yadasya tvam yadasya Deveshu atanu mimamsyam evate manye viditam. The first thing, of course, we have to do is, as we have done, and as our gurus like Bandanji, Govindacharya, and others have taught us, is that when we look at these verses, we need to understand what is the chandas in which it comes. Okay, and there are beautiful discussions on the chandas, but we will just spend briefly talking about this. Okay, this particular verse is beautiful because it can be viewed from various angles as various chandas. If you look at the first two verses, it's got 25 syllables. Okay, it's called Bhurik Gayatri. Here is a very quick question: how many syllables are there in Gayatri? The answer is already there, but anybody wants to tell us how many syllables are there in Gayatri? So 24, yeah. But in the first two, it's got 25. So this the scholars would take this particular verse as Bhurik Gayatri. It's got 25, 1 plus. Okay. And then if you look at the third line, Yadasya Tvam Yadasya Deveshu, 12, each 12 syllables is Jagati. Then Mimamsa Evate Manye Viditam, 11 verses Trishtu. So in this one portion, some folks think that this is prose, but if you look at it carefully, it is actually in meters. It is actually in set in centers, not actually in prose. What are the chandas that you can understand? Bhurik, Gayatri, Jagati, Trishtu. Okay, that is in one angle. Okay, here is another view of this verse, and again, we should never shy away from looking at all the prevailing views on this verse. So we all know Srimad Acharya's direct disciple was Trivikrama Panditacharya. And Trivikrama Panditacharya's son was Narayana Panditacharya. Okay, and in our Udupi Vedic rhetoric, we actually went to his house. We went to Trivikrama Panditacharya's house. We saw Narayana Panditacharya's Brindavana, and we spent a lot of time there about 3 or 4 months ago. Narayana Panditacharya's son, Vamana Panditacharya. Okay, so Vamana Panditacharya gives a bhashya on Keno Upanishad, where there are slight differences in the mantra, and that itself is interesting. Okay, and again, Bannanji picks about this quite a lot in his teachings. So, what is that? Vamana Panditacharya has taken this verse, Yedi manyase suvedeti dahram. Look at here, daharam. Okay, there is this word daharam in the current version, whereas in the old version it is dahram. Dahram evapi nunam tvam. And then here, nunam tvam veta brahmano rupam. No, nunam tvam na veta brahmano rupam is the original version from these kind of studies that are gurus teachers, that perhaps what Acharya taught to Trivikrama Panditacharya, and who taught it to his son, and who taught it to Vamana Panditacharya was based on this, and hence Vamana Panditacharya puts na there, and they are also interesting. So there is one version, there is no and there is daharam. There is the other version which is considered as more authentic. Yedi manyase suvedeti dahram evapi nunam tvam na veta brahmano rupam yadasya tvam yadasya deveshu atamimamsyam evate. That viditam here can be actually aviditam or viditam. That is how that sandhi can be separated out. Mimamsyam evate manye aviditam, mimamsyam evate manye viditam. So when you do these kind of splittings, our gurus tell us that the meters also change. Yeah, so this is what we call Panchapadi Jagati or Shatpadi Jagati. You can look at it in various forms. And when we come across Jagati, we should always think about the Abhimani Devatas of Jagati, right? And the Abhimani Devatas are all the Devatas and their consorts. The consorts and their husbands form the part of the Devatas of Jagati. Okay, it's got 48 syllables. So this particular verse is set in Shatpati Jagati. So we have seen Trishtup, we have seen Anushtup. Now we are seeing something that has come up in Jagati. So we think about the Abhimani Devatas there. Okay, so I hope you find that interesting. Now let's go into the substance matter of this. We got 10 minutes. So what is Chaturmukha saying? So Shiva said previously, oh, thank you very much, Chaturmukha. You've given me a good overview, and now my knowledge is very clear. Now I know who this Brahman is. Immediately Chaturmukha gives him a caution. Yedi manyase. If you think Suveda, Su plus Veda. Veda means to know. Su means knows very well, supremely well, super knowledge. Yeah. Suveda, I know very well. If you think I know very well, so that is Chaturmukha selling Rudra. If you think Shiva, if you think that you know very well, Dahramevapi. Okay, so Dahramevapi, let's look at that. Dahramevapi, there is also one rendition of Dhabramevapi, or what Acharya has given to Trivikrama, Narayana and Vamana Panditacharya as Dahramevapi. So you can put it in all three sections and get different philosophy there. Dahramevapi, Dhabramevapi, or Dahramevapi. Okay, so what is Dahara? What does Dahara actually mean? Dahara means little. Okay, so if you go to any Sanskrit dictionary, go to Moniad or check this out, put Dahara, it will give you little. Dahara also would mean subtle place. Okay, Dahram, Dhabram, they also mean little. Okay, so that kind of consistent. The meanings are the same, whereas the words are slightly different. But Vamana Panditacharya also gives an interesting twist to this by taking Dahara as Dahara Vidya. So anybody wants to tell us what is the Dahara Vidya? You may remember we have kind of looked at Dahara Vidya years ago in Chandogya Upanishad. Anybody wants to remind us what is the Dahara Vidya that comes in Upanishads? Dahara Vidya. Okay, so Dahara Vidya, if you remember of who's that? Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, it's about
Yeah.
the Paramatma and Jivatma's where the Jivatma and Paramatma is told in Dahara Vidya.
Yeah, beautiful, Pratibhaji. Devalji?
Yes, similar answer that Pratibhaji has said. So it's that reverse Lot Kamal, Pundarika thing, where the Jiva is situated within the body. So,
Yeah. Fantastic answers from Pratibhaji and Neetaji. Excellent, excellent. So Dahara is a subtle place. Subtle place is that Vyoma, that Parame Vyoman that is described in the Upanishad, that cave in this inverted lotus, in that inverted lotus area, there is a cave. That subtle place is called Dahara, and there is a Dahara Vidya of Chandogya Upanishad. And if anybody asks us, where is the soul, where is the super soul in the body, please go to Dahara Vidya to understand this. So they can all be put in this equation. Daharamevapi, Dhabramevapi, Dahramevapi. Okay, so the verse goes on, and I want to pick up the second one and then come back to the first two verses. Nunam tam veta. Nuna means definitely. Tvam means you. Veta, you know a little. Yeah, Dahramevapi Nunam tam veta. So if you put this whole thing together, then it becomes very beautiful. Chaturmukha says, oh Sadashiva, if you think that you know very well about this Brahman and his controllership, then let me tell you, definitely you know a little. You know very little only. Or if you take Vamana Panditacharya's version, which could be the original version that Srimad Acharya has taught, where it is Dahramevapi Nunam Tvam Na Veta. So, Sadashiva, if you think you know about this Brahman's controllership very well, let me tell you, definitely you don't even know a little. You don't even know a little is another way of looking at this. So they both give you similar ideas, isn't it? Either you know a little or you don't even know a little. It's a figure of speech, right? It's a figure of speech that you don't even know a little. That means that what we know is nothing about Brahman is what Chaturmukha, the Jivottama, is telling the Panchamukhi, the Shiva, that Yedi manyase suvedeti dahramevatpi nunam tvam na vetta. About whom? Brahmano Rupam. Okay, this Brahman's Rupa, what is its attributes? There itself, there's those fellows who think that there is this Brahman is got no form and so on. They just need to look at these verses, fine. Brahmano Rupam. His Rupa, his forms, how does he, and also his attributes as how he does and everything. You don't know anything, says Chaturmukha to Sadashiva. So this is a very abstract approach to presenting the concept of infinitude of Brahman. Okay, so there are two aspects to this verse. There's a figure of speech. If you look at the way they are said, Yadi manyase suvedeti dahramevapi nunam tvam vetta brahmano rupam yadasya tvam yadasya deveshu nan atanumimam sam evate manye viditam. Very much of a tongue twister. So this is called figure of speech. A word or a phrase used in a non-literal sense for a rhetorical or a vivid effect. So I just checked out in one of the English dictionaries what is figure of speech. So this is exactly what Chaturmukha does here. It gives a figure of speech. You know little, you don't know anything, and so on. To impact on how little we don't know, how little we know, or we don't even know that little well. Or there is alliteration, repetition of syllables, initial consonant sounds between nearby words. It's like Peter Pan picked a peck of pickled pepper. So that is alliteration. So that is similarly is the language that is used in the Upanishads. The modern English uses it now, but our Vedic rishis had used it, of course, eons ago. Okay, so these are all some of the nuances of this verse, including the various ways in which you can look at it. But I would probably go with what the Vamana Panditacharya has given us. Yadi manyase suvedeti dahramevapi nunam tvam naveta brahmano rupam yadasya tvam yadasya deveshu atanumimamsam evate viditam. Okay, so you don't know anything, Sadashiva is what Chaturmukha is saying. So what does that concept of infinitude or Brahman actually mean? So that is what is this discussion that is going to happen in the subsequent classes, okay, in the subsequent satsang. But I just want to finish off with this that probably we may want to think about before we go into our next, satsang where we will pick it up. Okay, the concept of infinitude of Brahman. How do we understand this? This whole idea of how this is supposed to work. Of course, we know what Brahman is, right? Atakasmad uchyate brahmeti bruhanto asmin gruha. Brahman is that which is big, big in gunas. Okay. Srimad Acharya in Bhagavata Tatparya Nirnaya gives a clarification. So this, I know we have did this before, but this particular section in the next satsang will pick it up in greater detail as to what does it actually mean. Okay. So we have just said space, time and gunas, but what does that space and gunas and time actually mean? Kalataha, kalato, deshataha, gunataha cha parama mahatvam sataha parabrahmanaha is what Srimad Acharya has given the definition of what does this atakasmad uchyate brahmeti actually mean. Deshataha, this Brahman is infinitude in space. Deshataha aparichinnatvam. Parichinna means limitation. Aparichinna means unlimited. Deshataha, this Brahman is unlimited. Kalataha aparichinnatvam, unlimited in time. Gunataha, infinitude of divine attributes. Gunataha aparichinnatvam. So these are all the attributes. Okay. Whereas our what we will do when we discuss this is from a Tattvavada perspective. When I think about Brahman, I will think about his Deshataha, Kalataha, and Gunataha. Okay. Whereas our monastic philosophers would not take the Gunataha aparichinnatvam. They use a concept called Vastutaha aparichinnatvam. That is really interesting. How that philosophy moves to try and justify its hypothesis, where they would say that this Brahman is Vastutaha aparichinnatvam. Therefore, other vastus don't if other material things actually really exist, they actually limit Brahman. So we reject the existence of other material things so that we can fit in the vastutaha aparichinnatvam of Brahman. Okay, so these are interesting, deep conversations of Tattvavada and monastic philosophy of understanding the infinitude of Brahman. And that is the reason why Chaturmukha is saying, you don't know anything, mate. You think you know, you actually do not know. Okay, that is how this kanda goes and finishes off with a very important verse, Avijñātam, which it talks about who knows, really knows, who does not know, and who knows, and there is all these discussions that happens. Okay, so we will pick it up in the next satsang. Thanks for joining us today for what I hope was a useful session to get our bearings again right, as we always do in the satsang, so that we know what is it that we have learned so far and what is it that Chaturmukha Brahma is going to talk about in this section. So, okay, on that note, Krishna Pranamastu. So if you have any questions, we can take it up. But thanks for excellent answers that have come out today with the revision of the first kanda. Right. So looks like we don't have any questions. And if we don't, then Suresh ji, are you there? Yeah. Suresh, can you tell us what's happening next week? We're going ahead with Gita, right? So if you could give us an update, please. No problem. It looks like Suresh is muted, but I'm pretty sure that we are going to have our part C, I think, of chapter 7, led by Venkiji and team. So we will do that for the next week. And then in August, we usually take our summer holidays in August for 4 weeks of, all the satsangis, they do their travels, etc. So we felt that we should take that 4 weeks break and then restart this particular kanda from where we left of Kena Upanishad from first week of September. So let's see how it goes. If we need to do the first week of August, so be it. If not, the Kena Upanishad will carry on in September, but please join us for the beautiful section that Venkiji is going to be leading for chapter 7, Gita Chintana. So on that note, thank you very much. Sushruji, do you want to take us through Omkara Chintana? Thank you very much, Sushruji. So take care, everyone, and I hope you have a good week. We'll see you again next Sunday for Gita chapter 7. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.